All right, so we're diving into how to win friends and influence people. But we're starting with a YouTube summary.
Talk about efficiency.
Right. I have to admit I was a little skeptical. But this summary really does a good job, I think, of bringing Carnegie's principles to life. And it shows how relevant they still are today. You know what I mean?
It's amazing, isn't it? Even though it was written decades ago, it taps into these fundamental human desires for connection and validation and influence. Those things really never go out of style.
Yeah, they don't. And this summary dives right into that first principle. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain.
Mm.
And they use this great story about pilot Bob Hoover. Apparently, a mechanic's error almost caused his plane to crash. But instead of, going ballistic, Hoover actually defended the mechanic
Right.
and focused on understanding what went wrong.
That's such a powerful example. Think about it. In a situation like that, it would be so easy to just lash out. But Hoover understood that criticism wasn't going to solve the problem, and it might
Yeah.
even make things worse by putting the mechanic on the defensive. So Hoover's approach, I think, is a great model for how to handle these kinds of situations, even if they're not, life or death.
It makes you think about how we react to criticism online, right? I mean, social media is basically a breeding ground for negativity.
Mm.
But if we all took Carnegie's advice to heart, maybe we could all be a little more like Bob Hoover and focus on understanding instead of condemnation.
Absolutely. And that leads us to the next principle, which is all about giving honest and sincere appreciation. And this isn't about empty flattery. This is about genuinely acknowledging and valuing others.
Right.
And the summary emphasizes how impactful a simple thank you can be, or a sincere compliment.
You know, it's funny. We all crave that kind of recognition,
Mm.
but we often forget to give it to others. Have you ever noticed how a genuine thank you can just completely change the energy of an interaction? It's like you're making a deposit into someone's emotional bank account.
I love that analogy. And Carnegie was definitely onto something here. He understood that appreciation is like a currency. It strengthens relationships, it motivates people, and it creates a more positive environment.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of connecting with people, that next principle is all about appealing to their interests.
Yeah.
And I love how the YouTube summary uses this analogy of fishing. You wouldn't try to catch a fish with cheesecake, would you?
Probably not.
Yeah.
You use bait that the fish is actually interested in. And it's the same with people. We need to find that common ground, that point of connection that makes them lean in and really listen. It's about understanding what makes them tick, and then tailoring our communication to those interests.
So it's less about manipulating people and more about finding that genuine point of connection. It's almost like the next principle, becoming genuinely interested in other people, right? They
Yeah.
kind of go hand in hand.
Exactly. When you show genuine interest in others, they feel seen and valued. It's about active listening, asking thoughtful questions, and remembering details about their lives. It's funny. We often think about charisma as this big, flashy thing, but sometimes the most charismatic people are simply the best listeners. They make you feel like you're the only person in the room.
It's like how a dog greets you,
Mm.
with pure, unadulterated enthusiasm. And while we're talking about simple yet powerful actions, the summary also highlights the importance of smiling. I mean, is it really that simple? Can a smile really make that much of a difference?
You'd be surprised. A smile is this universal symbol of warmth and friendliness. It instantly makes you more approachable, and it just sets a positive tone for the interaction. And there's actually science behind this. The act of smiling can trigger physiological changes that promote feelings of happiness and well-being, both for the person smiling and the person receiving the smile. It's like this little ripple effect of positivity.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, this next one is a challenge for me personally. Remembering names. I am terrible at it. But the YouTube summary really drove home the point that remembering someone's name is a sign of respect. It shows that you value them enough to remember this key detail about who they are.
It's such a small effort, but it has a huge impact. Think about it. Your name is central to your identity. When someone remembers it, it makes you feel seen and acknowledged as an individual. It strengthens that connection and builds rapport.
Yeah, and I bet that also makes people more receptive to what you have to say, right? Because they feel like you're actually paying attention.
You're absolutely right. It lays the groundwork for a more positive and productive interaction.
Okay, so we've talked about appreciating others, appealing to their interests, being genuinely interested in them, smiling and remembering their names. It sounds like we're building a pretty solid foundation for building relationships. But what about when things get a little more challenging? Like, what about when we need to communicate something that might not be so easy to hear?
That's where the next principle comes in. Be a good listener. And I think this is one of the most important principles in the entire book.
I'm all ears.
And it's easy to think we're good listeners. But true listening goes beyond just hearing the words. It's about being present, paying attention to nonverbal cues, and really trying to understand the other person's perspective.
So active listening is like a superpower we all possess,
Yeah.
but we forget to use it sometimes. We get caught up in our own thoughts or our need to respond, and we miss out on truly connecting with the other person.
Exactly. And that lack of connection can lead to misunderstandings, conflicts, and missed opportunities. And Carnegie really emphasizes that good listening is the foundation of strong relationships, both personal and professional. So if we want to win friends and influence people, we have to start by truly hearing them.
Makes a lot of sense. So once we've mastered the art of listening, what's next? Does Carnegie give any advice on how to navigate disagreements or conflicts?
He does, and his approach is pretty counterintuitive. He actually advises us to avoid arguments altogether. His principle is avoid arguments.
Yeah.
Now, I know that might sound impossible, especially in today's world where everyone seems to have a strong opinion about everything.
Right. I can already hear people saying, but what if I'm right?
Yeah.
What if I need to stand up for what I believe in? I mean, disagreements are a part of life, right?
They are, but Carnegie argues that engaging in an argument is rarely productive. Even if you win the argument, you might damage the relationship or create resentment. He suggests that it's much more effective to focus on understanding the other person's perspective and finding common ground.
So it's about shifting the goal from winning to understanding. Instead of trying to prove the other person wrong, you're looking for areas of agreement and building from there. That's a pretty big mindset shift.
It is, but it can be incredibly powerful when you approach a disagreement with the intention of understanding rather than arguing. You open up the possibility for a more constructive and collaborative conversation.
Interesting. And sometimes that might even mean admitting when we're wrong. Which brings us to the next principle. Admit wrongs quickly. The YouTube summary had this great anecdote about Carnegie getting caught breaking the leash law with his dog. He immediately apologized to the officer, and it totally disarmed the situation.
It's a perfect example of how owning up to our mistakes can actually work in our favor. It shows humility, a willingness to take responsibility, and it often diffuses tension and encourages the other person to be more forgiving.
It's like you're taking the wind out of their sails.
Yeah.
If you're already acknowledging the mistake, there's no need for them to keep hammering on it.
Precisely. And that ties into the next principle, which is all about seeing things from the other person's perspective.
Yeah.
It's about putting yourself in their shoes and trying to understand their motivations and feelings. Carnegie believes that empathy is a powerful tool for building relationships and resolving conflicts.
This reminds me of something I read recently about how important it is to assume positive intent, even if someone does something that upsets us. It's helpful to start by assuming that they didn't do it intentionally to hurt us. Maybe they were having a bad day, or maybe they just made a mistake.
I love that. Assuming positive intent is a great way to practice empathy and to create a more compassionate and understanding approach to our interactions. It allows us to see beyond the immediate situation and connect with the human being behind the behavior.
So instead of getting defensive or jumping to conclusions, we take a step back and try to understand where the other person is coming from. It's about seeing the world through their eyes, even if we don't agree with their perspective.
Exactly. And once we've done that, we're in a much better position to praise even the slightest improvement. This is another one of Carnegie's principles. That might seem counterintuitive at first. Why praise someone for something they should be doing anyway?
Right. Especially if they've made a mistake or fallen short of expectations. It's tempting to just focus on what they did wrong. But the YouTube summary had this amazing example of how consistent, genuine praise actually transformed a lazy employee into a star performer.
It's a powerful testament to the impact of positive reinforcement. When we focus on and acknowledge even small improvements, we create a positive feedback loop. It helps people build confidence, develop their skills, and feel appreciated for their efforts. And that can lead to even greater improvements down the road.
It's like you're watering a plant. A little bit of encouragement goes a long way.
I love that analogy. And when you combine that with the next principle, make the fault seem easy to correct, you're creating an environment where people feel supported and empowered to grow.
So instead of focusing on the negative and making them feel discouraged, you're highlighting the path forward. You're saying, hey, you've got this. Just a little tweak here, a little adjustment there, and you'll be golden.
Exactly. It's about framing challenges in a way that encourages growth and avoids discouragement. By focusing on the person's potential and providing specific guidance, we can help them see their mistakes as opportunities for learning and improvement.
So it's all about shifting the focus from what they did wrong to how they can do better next time. It's about providing that support and encouragement that helps them step up and reach their full potential.
It's amazing how a shift in perspective can make all the difference. When we focus on empowering others and making them feel capable, we unlock their potential and create a much more positive and productive environment.
It's like you're giving them the tools and the confidence to build their own success,
Yeah,
rather than constantly trying to fix them or control them.
exactly. And that brings us to the final principle, which ties everything together beautifully. It's about making the other person happy about doing the things you suggest.
Okay, this one sounds intriguing. The YouTube summary emphasized that it goes beyond simply appealing to the other person's interests. It's acknowledging why you want the action, and then highlighting the mutual benefits that both parties will enjoy.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's about transparency and creating a win-win situation. If we only focus on the other person's interests without revealing our own, it can feel manipulative or inauthentic. But when we're upfront about our motivations and then show how everyone will benefit, it creates a sense of shared purpose and buy-in.
So it's not just about getting what you want, it's about making sure everyone feels good about the outcome. It's about finding solutions that work for everyone involved.
Precisely. And with that, we've covered all 12 principles, outlined in How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's incredible how these principles, even though they were written almost a century ago, still hold so much relevance today.
I noticed like Carnegie had this uncanny ability to tap into the core of human nature. These principles are timeless because they address those fundamental needs we all have for connection, respect, and understanding.
And the beauty of it is, they're not just about manipulating people or getting ahead. They're about building genuine relationships, communicating effectively, and creating a more positive and productive environment for everyone.
So what does this all mean for our listener? What's the takeaway here?
Well, I think the most important thing is to remember that these principles are tools. They're not magic formulas or guaranteed shortcuts to success. But when we approach our interactions with empathy, authenticity, and a genuine desire to connect with others, we create the foundation for building stronger relationships and achieving greater success in all areas of our lives.
I love that. It's
Yeah.
not about mastering some complicated technique. It's about shifting our mindset and approaching our interactions with a spirit of generosity, understanding, and respect. And I think that's a message that's more relevant now than ever.
I couldn't agree more. And perhaps the most fascinating thing about Carnegie's work is that it encourages us to constantly reflect on our own behavior and strive to become better versions of ourselves. It's a journey of continuous growth and learning.
And that's a journey worth taking. So to our listener out there, I hope this deep dive has sparked some new insights and inspired you to put some of these principles into practice. You might be surprised at the positive impact they can have on your relationships and your life.